Welcome back to the Wide Right Podcast. Manny Navarro here from The Athletic, joined once again by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Pod. It's Wednesday, August 14th, right around 4:21 p.m. Carlos, we are 17 days away from kickoff for the opener, Miami playing in Gainesville against the hated Florida Gators. And I feel like today is almost the perfect time to start making some of our preseason predictions in terms of uh toughest games, maybe what Miami's final record will be, passing yards for Cam Ward, passing touchdowns, who leads the team in rushing yards, who leads the teams in catches. We did one of those episodes last year. I want us to go over, which freshman will probably have the biggest impact. We're going to rank Miami's opponents based on what we think are the toughest games versus what ESPN says it is in win probability. And then I want to check in on former Hurricanes and what they're doing because I don't know if you noticed, Carlos, but today Tyler Van Dyke was finally named the starting quarterback at Wisconsin. He was in a pretty thick battle for the job over there. And there are a lot of former Canes that are in new places, guys that were here under the Mario regime at one point or another. And fans may be wondering what happened to that guy? Where's he at? What's going on with his career? So I want us to get over that. And then, of course, answer mailbag questions. But I got to start, Carlos, with something that may catch you off guard. I made my preseason prediction in the mailbag. Somebody asked me, this was the question. I'm going to go to exactly how I wrote it because I don't want to mince words. It says, what is your realistic prediction for this season? Joel Klatt says it's an 11-1 roster. I've been a lifelong Canes fan, but they haven't been the same since Ken Dorsey left. Is Cam Ward a guy who can take them to the next level and challenge for a playoff spot? That's Brian C. And then Zachary P. basically asked the same question in much shorter language. He says, "Is this a year?" Question mark. So I wrote, Carlos, and I'm going to repeat this verbatim. I'm picking Miami to win the ACC and earn a top four seed in the college football playoff.
So, first of all, who are you? Where's Manny Navarro? And who is this body snatcher that jumped into his body and come onto this show? Because that does not sound like you at all. Unless, unless, as an FSU fan, you're pulling the old okey doke reverse psychology and trying to jinx his team and hoping that that result is really FSU's result.
I am not. I decided after some conversations and some thought process on where this Hurricanes team is. I got a chance to go to Charlotte, talk to a bunch of people up there, got to analyze rosters, got to make some phone calls this week. I'm working with Sam Kahn and Bruce Feldman on the impact of transfers across the country. Not just, hey, this guy was good before, what's he gonna, be like in his new place? We actually called and spoke to people on the ground at schools this week to see who is actually doing what at several universities. And of course, I tried to handle as many ACC schools as possible. And I just feel good about this Miami team. I just think it's year three of the Mario Cristobal era. He's built it the right way with the offensive and defensive line. And there's just too many people telling me that Cam Ward is the truth and that he is going to lift this team and elevate them to a level that they haven't been at before. So whether or not that's 11-1, whether or not that's 10-2, um, I think Miami is going to win at least 10 games, and I think they are going to win the conference this year. And look, they were picked third in the preseason. They're ranked 19th and both the coaches in the Associated Press poll. Um, but the ACC isn't full of badasses. I think Florida State has their issues. I think Clemson certainly has their issues. I think NC State's a good team, but they haven't necessarily been able to cross over the hump. Louisville's going to be good again. But I just like Miami, and I think a lot of it is predicated on Cam Ward. So that's why I'm buying in.
Yeah, I think, when you look back at one of the things that derailed the team last season, it obviously was a turnover issue with Tyler Van Dyke. Um, and I think had they been able to get a little bit better quarterback play and less turnovers, just effective quarterback play, right? Reasonable, effective, decent quarterback play without turning the ball over, they probably would have finished 9-3 last year. And I think with this roster, I think it's significantly better compared to last year. Of course, there's still holes. I think the depth issue is still a problem. So, clearly if there's some issues in terms of injuries at certain positions, things can change in a hurry. But going into the season and looking at what we're looking at in terms of the talent on this roster, I think on paper this could be like you said, an 11-1, 10-2 team, and should win the ACC based on talent. I think you're not far off. I think you're accurate in terms of the assessment of the talent. Now the question is, do they live up to the hype? Which, games aren't won on paper. Do they translate that to the field, and do they get the sort of coaching and performance from the players that they need to be that sort of a team coming off, you know, the last two seasons where it's been disappointing and the wheels have fallen off at certain stages of the season?
Yeah. And look, if you want to read all of my thoughts, and again,
I
I'm
don't,
not
but
t
I'll do it anyway.
I'm not telling you I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I did finally write my um season predictions for everybody in college football. I took the top 25 and I did a team by team breakdown. I predicted Heisman Trophy winner. I predicted ACC players of the year. I did the whole thing. Game by game. And this is all from my off season of research and talking to people and everything. But I just feel like Miami is a top four seed. My oddly specific predictions will be coming out in The Athletic tomorrow, Thursday, August 15th. You can laugh at me all you want, just like people did last year. But like I try to tell them, I hit on 33% of my predictions last year that are very oddly specific. Like I predicted Manny Diaz was going to become a head coach in the ACC. I said it would be Boston College. It turned out to be Duke. But I got partial credit for that, certainly. There are a lot of other ones that I nailed. I mean, I picked Washington to make it to the Final Four and to beat Oregon twice on the way to the semifinals. That's exactly what they did. And everybody kept doubting Texas last year. Like Texas was the, oh, we're back. Everybody was laughing. Texas will never be back. I made that prediction as well. I said the Longhorns would win the Big 12 and get into the college football playoff. So I'm not calling myself Nostradamus or anything like that, but dude, like I had a pretty good percentage, and I feel this way about Miami this year because I just think more than anything, Cam Ward and the way that Mario has built this, which is through the offensive and defensive lines, where I think they are high enough quality. I like the skill positions. I like the running back depth. I like the wide receiver depth. I think, Kiko Mauigoa is a guy that I think is probably top five at his position in terms of middle linebackers. There's certainly warts on this team. I'm not highly confident in the secondary, but if you have a great front seven, which I think Miami could potentially be top five front seven, it's certainly in the league and certainly, maybe top 15 in college football, you can win the conference. And the one thing people have to understand is just because I'm saying Miami will be a top four seed doesn't mean I say Miami's going to be a top four team. There's a big difference. The
Right.
seeding process, the 12-team playoff, basically, if you win one of the power conferences, you are going to be a top four seed, which means, the Big Ten champ and the SEC champ will probably be number one and two. And then you'll have the ACC and the Big 12 champ that'll be three and four. And, Utah is my pick to win the Big 12 this year. Kyle Whittingham's been there a long time. They're a physical team. They're coming over from the Pac-12. I think they could lose potentially three games, but if they lose three games and still win the conference, they are the number four seed or the number three seed, and so Miami potentially could be the same way. And I think, between the Big Ten and the SEC, those conferences are always going to get the bias. They'll get the majority of the at-large bids. I think the ACC will get two teams in this year, but I'm not extremely confident on that. So, but the point is, like all of the rankings, the seedings have nothing to do with how good the teams really are. It's just more about, what perception is ultimately at the end of the year. So, and I just like this Miami team. So. Carlos, I want to get into some of the over under mark statistical takes because that was one of the questions that I got in the mailbag that came out on Tuesday. And for starters, I just wanted to share these numbers, and I know you're probably aware of these, but Miami averaged 31.5 points per game last season, which was tied for 39th among FBS programs. They averaged 6.4 yards per play, which was 24th. The breakdown of plays was actually near almost exactly 50-50 between pass run. They were extremely balanced type team. I think they're still going to be that way unless they get into maybe a couple of shootouts where the offense is going to have to score a lot of points to win. But let's start with uh, the team goals, right? Which is points per game on offense. 31 and a half. If you had to give me a number right now in your head, what do you think Miami is at the end of the season?
I'd say somewhere around 35.
Okay. I agree with that. I think 35 is probably a good number. I was gonna look up where 35 points a game averaged last year to
I think it's like top 20 probably.
yeah, 35 points a game. There were 16 teams. Ole Miss was the last team, the 16th team to average at least 35 points a game. So if you are in the top 16 in the country, let's just look at it. Mississippi, Texas, Michigan, Washington, Penn State, Texas State, Kansas State, Liberty, SMU, Notre Dame, Memphis, Georgia, Oklahoma, USC, Oregon, and LSU. Those were the highest scoring teams in college football last year. And all of them, you could pretty much say were really good, right?
Yes, and they all had really good seasons. And to me, it's one of those things like obviously like we've talked about in the past. If you want to be elite, it's got to be 40 plus, right?
Yeah.
Or at least right at the brink of 40. But really, 40 plus is what makes you elite. It makes you competitive for a national championship, and you got to be a top 10 defense as well. So we'll see how that goes. To me, in terms of the balance at 50-50, I remember Mike Leach saying a long time ago, it's not about 50-50 run pass. It's about being able to move the football, get it into playmakers' hands, and get 3 yards when you need to get it. It doesn't necessarily have to be through a run, but really spreading the ball around and getting into your playmaker's hands. So, I mean, if they're 60-40 pass this year and they're averaging 37, 38 points a game, or if they're 60-40 run and they're getting 37, 38 points a game, it doesn't matter really in the balance structure. To me, it's more about who's the hot hand, who's your best weapon. If it turns out to be that, riding Damian Martinez and that offensive line is the best way to go, yes, ride that. But I think you're going to see a lot more explosiveness with this offense in the passing game because of Cam Ward. I think because of the receivers as well. Hopefully, the tight ends and the backs get to be featured a little bit in the passing game this year. Because if not, that's going to hurt them. Because they're going to be a little bit limited in terms of how they spread the ball around and what they're able to do conceptually and strategically. But I think this year they'll probably be a little bit more like 55-45 in terms of pass run because you have Cam Ward at quarterback.
Well, I was going to get to Cam Ward and passing yards next. Last year, he was eighth in total passing yards among FBS quarterbacks, 3,736 yards, 25 touchdowns, seven picks, completed roughly 66% of his passes. But in terms of passing yards, 3,736, that's a pretty sizable number. Um, when you think about what he can do in this offense, if you had to take an over under on that number, what are you betting?
So over under 3,700, call it 3,800. I think you'll average somewhere around that 290, almost 300 mark. Let's say I'm going to go under. I'm going to go around 35 to 3,600 yards.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I think he's going to probably be closer to 3,300, 3,400 yards for this season. That's my number for him. I don't think 3,800. I think 290 is a good mark and ultimately, this was through 12 games last season. If I've got Miami in the ACC championship game, winning the ACC championship game and then making at least one playoff game, that's going to be 14 games. So, in
Let's
12, he
quantify it. We're talking about a regular season number, right?
yeah, if we want to go regular season number, it's 3,700 was what he threw last year because they were
Right.
5-7 last year at Washington State. So,
So I'm going under that number.
all right, fair enough. He averaged 311 yards a game. I think 290 is probably a good number for that. Passing touchdowns, 25 last season for him, which when you look at the number of quarterbacks who hit 25, there were 19 quarterbacks last year who hit 25 touchdown passes for the season. I'm gonna go over some of them, and some of them are pretty good. Drew Aller at Penn State, Devin Leary at Kentucky, Noah Fifita at Arizona, Talia Tagovailoa at Maryland, Byron Brown at South Florida, Haynes King at Georgia Tech, Shador Sanders at Colorado, Preston Stone at SMU, Caleb Williams, USC, Dylan Gabriel, who's now at Oregon, Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix. Those were all guys that hit the 25 touchdown mark. I think he's going to throw over 30 touchdowns. That's my number for him this year. What's your mark?
I was thinking right at 30
Okay.
because we're talking 2.5 a game. I think he gets to right around 30. I think he doesn't get more just because I think Damian Martinez and the backs are going to be effective as well.
hmm
And they're going to get a lot of touchdowns that way as well.
All right, let's go to rushing yards. Damian Martinez had a big year at Oregon State. Averaged me see, what did he average for the year? He averaged 6.11 yards per carry, 194 carries, 1,185 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Miami's leading rusher the last couple seasons got nowhere near that number. It's been a while, in fact, since Miami's had a 1,000 yard rusher. But I tend to lean towards this offense having a 1,000 yard rusher this year, especially if they're going to average 35 points a game. And I think that for Mario's recruiting purposes, right, whether through the transfer portal or high school recruiting and the reputation he has as a good offensive line coach, he's going to need at least one of his two backs, I think, to hit the 1,000 yard mark, right? Because you can brag about that. Hey, we had a 1,000 yard rusher last year. We had a 3,500 yard passer. We had a 1,000 yard receiver. Those are the kind of things that translate when you go into the room to recruit a guy. So, um, what's your feeling on Damian Martinez? I'm gonna say he gets just over 1,000 yards.
So I'm going to do some quick math here, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting him to get about 18 carries a game, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if he averages, let's say, a little bit under that 6 yards per carry, so 18 times 12, that's 216 carries. Let's multiply that by about 5.8 yards a carry. That's 1,252. I say 1,200 yards.
All right. I'm gonna say 1,000. Carlos says 1,200 yards, and I'm assuming we're gonna agree that it's Damian Martinez that leads the team in
Correct.
rushing.
Yeah.
All right, rushing touchdowns. Martinez last year had 9. I'm looking at Miami. Their leading rush, I think, had 6 last year. Um, your thoughts on rushing touchdowns? Cam Ward had a lot of rushing touchdowns last year. I think he had 8 at Washington State. So he is the kind of guy who will take off and run, especially near the end zone, which in fantasy football they call that vulturing, right? Taking touchdowns away
Yeah.
from the backs. What is your number on, and who do you think leads the team in rushing touchdowns?
Well, I think it's going to be Damian Martinez. I think he gets about 10.
Hmm.
I think you're probably going to see Mark Fletcher get about 5 to 6. So I think they'll have. I don't think Cam Ward gets that many rushing touchdowns. I don't think he gets 8. He'll probably get 4, 5
Hmm.
maybe. I think one of the things they're going to try and do is protect him, not use him in the running game because that's what Shannon Dawson had said. I think it's going to be one of those things where, if he sees an opportunity to scramble and get in the end zone, he'll do it. If he sees the opportunity to scramble and pick up a first down and get himself out of bounds, he'll do it. But I think they're going to actually focus on telling him to stay in the pocket, deliver the football, get rid of it, not to use his legs as much. I don't think he's going to have to do it as much because I think in Washington State he had a bad offensive line. So there was a tendency to bail the pocket and get out there and try and make plays with his legs just because he was under threat pretty much the entire game. So I think he's going to be a little bit more comfortable in the pocket. He also wants to audition for the NFL, so he's going to want to show that he can, work from the pocket, deliver the ball downfield, find receivers, keep his eyes downfield. So I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to run the ball as much. So for me, it's going to be a situation where Cam Ward doesn't have as many opportunities to try and run the football. I don't think they're going to do a lot of zone read with him because they want to protect him. They don't want to have their, prized potential ACC player of the year get injured early in the season because they're trying to use him too much in the run game. So I think the running backs are going to get a lot of work in the goal line area.
I agree. As a team, Miami ran for 24 touchdowns last year. I think Martinez is going to actually. I got him down for 15 touchdowns. I think he's going to.
Wow.
I think he is going to pound the ball in a lot. Uh,
Now, two things. Number one, I from now on I need to use a safe word with the real Manny Navarro before we get on the air because this whole thing is really throwing me for a loop. I don't know what's going on. Did you drop some CBD before the show? Did you take some shrooms? I don't know what's going on here.
Hey,
Uh,
I'm buying the hype this year, dude. What can I tell you? And look, 15 touchdowns. Just for a little bit of perspective, there were only 2 guys in the FBS level that had. Actually, no, that's receiving touchdowns. That's my fault. I'm looking at the wrong category right here. There were 15, 14 backs that had at least 15 touchdowns last year. Quinshawn Judkins is one of them. Penny Boone, who's now at Toledo. Marion Hampton led the ACC with 15 touchdowns. RJ Harvey over at UCF. Audric Estime at Notre Dame. And then Blake Corum had 27 for the national champs. 27 touchdowns in 15 games is a lot of touchdowns. I think Quinshawn Judkins' number of 15. I think a guy like Damian can hit that number.
Now, when you say they're going to pound it, what are they going to? Are they going to pound?
Well, when they get down to the inside the five, I think Mario's going to do a lot of handing the ball off because I think physically they're going to be able to just overmatch a lot of their opponents.
See, the real Manny Navarro would have said, pound nuts in their mouth in the end zone. Now I know you are a faker, and you've been supplanted by some sort of a body double.
All right, receiving leader. Last year Xavier Strebel had one of the best seasons by a Miami receiver in a while. 85 catches, 1,092 yards, 6 touchdowns. Um, I think there's more weapons on this team. Sam Brown is around. I think we're going to see Isaiah Horton emerge. Jacoby George is still there. You have some freshmen that are good. I'm taking the under on 85. I think our team leader in catches this year probably has closer to 65, 70 catches. I think Restrepo will still be the team leader in catches. What do you say about team leader in catches?
Yeah, I think he's going to be somewhere around that 65 to 70 range. I don't think he's going to get up there into the 80s. I think part of the reason why he had so many catches. Number one, he had a great relationship with Tyler Van Dyke, aside from the fact that he always got open. The other thing was once Tyler was out, he's the security blanket, right? He's not the guy running those deep routes a whole lot of the time. He's
Hmm.
running a lot of underneath routes, so it's easy and quick to find him for those other quarterbacks. So to me, and like you're saying, I think there's a lot of talent that's going to be spread around in terms of the receiving core with a Josiah Trader, with a JoJo Trader, with a Sam Brown, with Isaiah Horton emerging, Jacoby George still being there. There's a lot of guys that can get on the field and make plays, and hopefully they spread the ball out to those playmakers. And I think Cam Ward's the kind of quarterback that'll do that. I don't think he's going to lock in on one guy. So I think there's going to be less receptions for Restrepo, but I think he still leads the team in receiving probably somewhere around that 65, 70 range, 900 yards.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll lead the team in catches. Yards might be different. I think Miami's, maybe biggest big play threat, which will either be Jacoby George or Sam Brown, one of those two guys. I think will end up having potentially more than 1,000 yards. If you look at Cam Ward's distribution last year, he had three receivers with at least 60 catches, and the receiving yardage was 923 yards, 860 yards, and 843 yards. It's pretty good to have three receivers on your own team with over 800 yards in just 12 games. And those guys combined for the majority of those touchdown passes that he threw 25. So I think there's a chance that all three of Miami's receivers eclipse the 800-yard mark again, with maybe Sam Brown leading the team with over 1,000 yards receiving. Again, those kind of benchmarks, Mario can sit here and say they don't matter, but that's what he was trying to do for Don Chaney Jr. last year when the fumble happened, right?
Oh God, we always got to go back to Georgia Tech. But I think to me, the reason why they had so many guys with over 800 yards at Washington State is they threw the ball a ton. So
Right.
their attempts were, significantly higher than anything Miami's going to have this year. I don't think Cam Ward is going to attempt that many passes this year. I think be somewhere around two-thirds of them, but it maybe was at Washington State last year in
Hmm.
terms of attempts. Um, and I think because of that, although they'll have, probably a high per catch average, I think the other guys behind Restrepo will be somewhere around 700, 600 in that range.
Yeah, the guy who led Washington State in receiving yardage averaged 15 yards a catch. That's a pretty healthy average. For comparison, if you're wondering, let me look at Restrepo. Restrepo averaged 12.8 yards a catch. So that's not that he wasn't good and made a couple deep plays. It's just, 15 yards a catch is a pretty healthy average.
Yeah,
Um, Receiving touchdowns. Last year, I think I picked Colby Young because he was the big target around the end zone to lead the team in touchdown catches. Let me go look who actually ended up leading them in touchdown catches.
I think
It
it was
might,
Restrepo, wasn't it?
let's see here. No, it was Jacoby George with
Oh, yeah.
eight. Jacoby George had eight, including several long catches. Jacoby George averaged 15 yards a catch last year, by the way. Um, I'm gonna go with Jacoby George again. I think there's gonna be a lot of attention paid to Sam Brown. I think Restrepo will get a lot of eyeballs on him, which I think is going to free up Jacoby George, especially around the end zone, to score more touchdowns. So I'm going to go repeat Jacoby George, and I think eight is probably a good number in terms of leading the team in touchdown catches.
You know
All
what?
right.
I'm going to go off the wall here, and I'm going to go Isaiah Horton just because of his size. I think they may go to him closer to the goal line, try and get some jump balls with him, and use his size advantage.
All right, so Kiko Mauinoa led the team in tackles last season, had 82. Cam Kitchens was next with 73. I'm sorry, Cam Kitchens was third with 59, and James Williams was second with 73. Those were your three leading tacklers from a year ago. I don't know that anybody on this defense is going to approach 100 tackles because the way that they play defense, Carlos, they're not really dependent on one guy to blow up. But I think 85 tackles is a fair number for Maui Goa, and that's going to be my over/under number for the team leader.
Um, I'll give him just over. How about that? Let's go 88.
All right. All right. And then tackles for loss. Maui Goa actually led the ACC in tackles for loss with 18 last season. Made a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. Miami had 88 tackles for loss as a team. Ruben Bain had 12 and a half. This year, I am going to go with Ruben Bain to lead the team in tackles for loss with 15. I just think there's going to be a lot of love to spread around. This is a team that had 36 sacks as a unit last year. I think that they're going to make a lot of plays in the backfield because of their front seven, and I think Ruben Bain will be the leader of that cause.
I agree. I think because of the sacks and his ability to get in the backfield, Ruben Bain probably leads his team in tackles for loss. And dark horse, watch out for Akeem Mesidor.
Okay, could very well be a big year for Keem Mesidor and his comeback. In terms of sacks, I'm picking Bain to lead the team with 7. It won't be enough to win ACC Defensive Player of the Year. There's some other guys that are just in better statistical situations, but because Miami has such great depth at that defensive line position, Bain is going to be able to get some help this year from other guys on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are 4 or 5 guys on this roster with at least 4 or 5 sacks each
Yeah,
because of just the way pressure comes and where it comes from, and ultimately Bain will be the best one at doing it. But I just don't think he's going to put up huge numbers because there's going to be so much love to spread around. All right, and then this is the last one. Interceptions. Last year, not Cam Kitchen's best year. He had 6 picks in 2022, but he had 5, and he was a great ball hawk over the last couple of years. The next number was 3 by Takori Couch. Both of those guys are gone. In fact, the only guys with interceptions still on this team, Carlos, from last year
oh God.
are Ahmad Moten and Kiko Mauinoa. And they each had 1. So
Wow.
there will be a new interception king on the University of Miami football team this year. Who is your pick to be that person?
I'm gonna go Damari Brown.
Good pick. I think Damari is a guy that teams are going to try to stay away from. So I'm gonna go with the transfer. I'm gonna go with Deani Hill from Marshall, who is gonna play some on the outside. I think he's the kind of guy who could have a really big year statistically because he could be somebody that teams target because they're gonna look at Daryl Porter Jr. They're gonna look at Damari Brown and say, well, we know those guys can play at this level. I think Deani Hill. Who comes over from Marshall has to sort of prove himself a little bit, and I think that's going to allow him some opportunities to get picks. I do think it'll be a cornerback, not a safety. I like Mish Powell a lot. I think he's going to be super effective for Miami, but I don't know that he is a gambler per se in the secondary. And I think Dayani Hill will end up leading Miami in picks. All right. That's our over under because I know fans always ask those questions. I got it in the mailbag this week for the Athletic, and I figured that'd be a fun thing for us to do. Let's dive into freshman impact, Carlos, because everybody likes to talk about freshmen. Who's going to play? What about the new guys? Where's the new blood? Yada, yada, yada. One thing to point out here before we get rolling on this, let me ask you this. How many freshmen do you think started last season?
How many freshmen do I think started last season?
Started an actual game for Miami. And these are true freshmen, true freshmen.
6.
6. Very good. Very good guess. Can you name them?
Mark Fletcher, Ruben Bain, Francis Marinoa.
Mm-hmm. No,
Uh,
Francis Marino, you're right tackle. Yep.
yeah. Who else? I think Ahmad Moten started one game, didn't he?
No, he wasn't a freshman. You had Jaden
Oh, sorry,
Wayne,
my bad. Jane Wayne.
Ruben Bain, Damari Brown, and Mark Fletcher, right?
Okay.
With Maui Noah and Emory Williams. So those were your guys that were able to start a game last year. So 6 out of the 23 freshmen that were signed in the 2023 cycle appeared and made at least one start. When you look at this freshman class, I think that I would go under. I don't think there's going to be 6
Yeah.
freshmen who start games this season just because this is an older, more experienced team. But if you had to give me a number, Carlos, which freshman do you think actually cracked the starting lineup this year?
I'd go 3. and I think
Okay.
it's probably going to be JoJo Trader. Might end up starting mid-season. I think you're going to get Justin Scott probably starting at the defensive tackle spot, if not right off the bat, pretty soon after. And Zaquan Patterson, I think may end up starting some time at safety.
I think those are good gambles. You say three, I say two end up starting. I just think there's just not going to be enough opportunity. And I'm going to go with an oddball pick here. I think OJ Frederick, the cornerback, who I know the coaching staff, Lance Guidry was really excited about, saying he did a good job in the offseason, coming over from St. Thomas Aquinas, has the physicality to maybe get into that slot corner spot for at least one game. I think the secondary is where this is going to happen. And then I would also go Justin Scott. I think late in the year. I don't think early in the year. I think late in the year, Justin Scott will work himself into a position where he starts for Miami at the defensive tackle spot. Those are my two guys. I think Zaquan Patterson is going to be a big time contributor for Miami, but I think he'll probably be coming off the bench most of the season for
Unless there's
Miami,
an injury.
unless there's an injury. Yeah. So I'm gonna go Justin Scott and I'm gonna go OJ Frederick as the two guys. I don't think any of the freshman receivers start a game this year. That doesn't mean they won't play. It doesn't mean they won't have an impact. I just don't think any of them start. I don't think Elijah Lofton starts at tight end as much as I like him. And I think he'll be a specialist for this team. All right, Carlos, let's move on now to ranking Miami's opponents from easiest to toughest. The ESPN win probability thing came out recently, and reverse order. This is reverse order in terms of win probability for the Hurricanes. First of all, there's four games that they give the Hurricanes less than a 50% chance to win. Do you want to guess what they are?
I'm going to say Florida State, Louisville, um, maybe Florida.
That's another one, which is the last one.
Shoot, that's a good question. Not sure what the fourth one is.
California. California.
Wow, the Cal Bears.
The
Well,
Cal
that's highly
Bears.
respected.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with this assessment whatsoever. First of all, I think at the most Miami's going to lose two regular season games, assuming they're healthy and have Cam Ward at quarterback.
You know what?
Uh,
It's on the road, isn't it? That's why.
it's on the road, and the one thing I will say about Cal, they haven't hosted too many Southeast schools, but I looked this up and I included this in my mailbag. They lost to Auburn last year, 14-10 at home, led most of that game. But before that, they had won the four previous games against ACC or SEC schools who went
It's a
out
tough place to
went
play, and
out to
here's why.
Cal.
And
Yeah.
here's why. It's that the stink of kombucha and peyote from the stands really affects the opposing team. So all that peyote, all that kombucha, all that lack of deodorant, the dreads from the Caucasian fans, all that stuff, all that stench is rough. It's tough to deal with.
All right, brother. Well, look, let's go to easiest to toughest here, and we can agree and disagree. And maybe what we do is move opponents up and down as we talk about this. But this is ranking them in reverse order, easiest to toughest. All right, and this is according to the ESPN win probability machine. All right, Miami's got a 99% chance to beat FAMU. I agree that's got to be the easiest game on the schedule, even though, by the way, the Rattlers were 12-1 last year. I don't know if you paid attention. They were pretty good
I did
last year.
not. No, I did not.
Ball State is next, which is the week three matchup. They got a 94% win probability for that one. No argument. Ball State isn't necessarily a great program, so that'll be a nice week for
Balls to
Miami.
Ball State.
Yeah, they're gonna ball against Ball State. Then they have the last home game, which is against Wake Forest, November 23rd, as the next easiest game on the Canes schedule.
Hmm.
As I'm getting messaged over and over again here as we're
Some news is broken.
No, 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 no. I just have people reaching out to me on the desk on the Slack thing. I keep getting the little alerts, so I apologize. It's just people wanting to reach out to. I told you it's a busy time of year for me, brother. I've been all over the place working here the
You
last
got sports writers sliding into your DMs.
I got a bunch of that process happening for me right now. All right, going back to the win probability here for these teams. USF 80.3% win probability. I would say that's the first tough game of the season, right?
I
in
agree.
terms of.
I think Florida is going to be tougher than everybody's anticipating, but I think USF is going to be also tougher than people think it is. They have a dynamic quarterback. They've been improving. I don't think USF is a pushover.
All right. So I'm gonna. This is where I'm gonna make the first adjustment. Right. We've got FAMU, Ball State, Wake Forest. I'm gonna move USF uh down the list because Duke is next on the list. Duke's win percentage probability is 74.9%. Look, Manny Diaz is going to be emotional. His players are going to be fired up to come play for him. But that Duke team is not better than USF, in my opinion,
No.
when I look at them on paper. So I'm going to go ahead and slide Duke below Wake Forest and ahead of USF in terms of the easiest to toughest uh, discussion. Next on the list is Virginia Tech, which is kind of surprising to me, Carlos, because I think Virginia Tech's gonna have a pretty good team. They're 7-6. Kyron Drones and Cam Ward have a pretty good rivalry going between themselves. They're related. They're actually related through family. And they talk trash to each other a whole lot during their workouts back home in Houston. I think it's going to be an emotional game, and it's the ACC opener on a short week. So this is a game that I don't know where I slotted in, but I 72.5% win percentage on a short week. I think that's kind of high. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. I think Virginia Tech's gonna be a lot better than they were last year. I think they're always tough. They always play Miami tough, and I think, like you said, Kyron Drones is gonna be a really good quarterback, and it's gonna be tough to face him in Virginia Tech this year. It's to me, that's the overlooked rivalry. Everybody points to Florida State. And that's why when we talked about, Virginia Tech being eliminated from the schedule when they did this whole revamp of the ACC schedules, of that not being a permanent opponent, to me, Virginia Tech since Miami's, even back to the Big East days, they've been just as big a rival as Florida State has since those days in the Big East, and it's been consistent year in and year out. Always great games. It's very rare that one team blows out the other. And it's always a fun watch. So I think they'll beat them, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people anticipate.
Syracuse is next on the list, ahead of in terms of toughness over Virginia Tech, and I guess part of that has to do with the fact that it's in at Syracuse, 70.3 win
Yeah, because you know
percentage.
what happens? Sometimes they turn the thermostat down in the Carrier Dome to like 70. So when you're in there and it's 70 degrees, you need a long sleeve shirt, or else you're gonna get un gripe, which is what we Cubans call like a little cold. You're gonna get a little gripe in Syracuse in that 70-degree weather.
Kyle McCord is a good quarterback, Carlos. Like I know that people were crapping on him at Ohio State, and they thought maybe he was an underachiever, and I think he's going to be a pretty good quarterback. I like some of the weapons they got on offense. Fadil Diggs is going to be a good edge rusher, the transfer from Texas A&M. But I still think Virginia Tech is a tougher game than Syracuse. So I'm going
I
to
agree.
slide Syracuse up the ladder. In fact, I might even move them past USF and underneath Duke. I think Miami season goes as well as it should. That game at Syracuse won't be a cakewalk, but it will not necessarily be as tough as maybe USF and Virginia Tech. So I'm moving it to fifth toughest game on the schedule.
I agree with you. Yes, you've definitely been body snatched because I'm agreeing with you too many times.
All right, Georgia Tech, November 9th,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
61.4 win probability for Miami. Look, there's definitely some demons that need to be exercised by Mario in that game. They have a decent team. I wouldn't say a great team. They have a decent team. I think defensively, they are still, questionable, unless Cam Ward develops, the Tyler Van Dyke syndrome. I can't see them struggling offensively in that game. In fact, they've got a new defensive coordinator over there, and I don't necessarily like a lot of their weapons on defense. But offensively, Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, some of the receivers they didn't have a very good day last year against Miami. They will be home. It's an interesting game, Carlos. How do you feel about that Georgia Tech game
I
on the
think because
road versus Virginia Tech compared to
of,
Virginia Tech at home?
because of what happened last year, I think they go in there and they thump Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech again is another team that always plays Miami tough, but there's been instances where Miami runs away with it. I think this is gonna be one of those games where they go in Atlanta and they handle business, just because a lot of those guys that were on the team last year remember what it felt like when they lost the game that they had in hand. And I think Mario is going to be hyper focused that week to make sure, next time they mention Georgia Tech, it's not because of a knee, it's because they just thumped them.
Right. I agree. I think it's going to be high motivation for Miami, and they haven't had a problem going into Atlanta and winning in the past.
No.
I don't think it's the kind of environment where you poop your pants. Like if Miami had to play at Virginia Tech, I think that would be a much tougher place to go than to go into Georgia Tech and win. Hell, I can tell you this from sitting in the stands at Georgia Tech to cover those games. There's more signs for the Georgia Bulldogs on big billboards outside the stadium than even Georgia Tech. So until Georgia Tech crosses a threshold where they're playing at a much higher level, I think that's going to be an easier game for Miami to win than.
I think the Atlanta traffic is going to be tougher to deal with than Georgia Tech.
All right, well, Georgia Tech fans are eating this up, by the way, Carlos. I'm sure they are.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of Georgia Tech fans listening to the podcast right now, and they're all pissed off. There's like, if there's one or two, you know what, guys, you deserve it.
All right, California. We mentioned it already. 46.8 win probability for Miami. I'm going to agree with where they're at here. I do think it is the fourth toughest game on Miami's schedule, and here's why. You're playing Virginia Tech 8 days prior to that at home in the ACC opener, and now you got to travel over 3,000 miles to the West Coast for the first time. This is going to be the first time Miami's gone out and played on the West Coast in a long, long time. Jaden Ott is a very, very good running back. And look, Cal was a bowl team a year ago. They're not a great team. This is not some juggernaut. But I think just the newness of all of that, of having to go on the road, play on the West Coast, face an opponent that you haven't necessarily seen too much of in the last few years, although they did meet in that Emerald Bowl. I don't know, what was it, 15 years ago now? It's not like they haven't played Cal in 100 years. But my point is, it's going out to the West Coast and having to play that game. I do agree that it is probably the fourth toughest game on the schedule.
Yeah, it's that peyote and kombucha. But what I would say is, I think, like you're saying, it's difficult to go out to the West Coast. What's the game after Cal on the schedule?
The game after Cal, actually, I think Miami has a bye week, and then it's 2 weeks after that they have Louisville.
Okay. So, there's always that chance of looking ahead coming after a big game against Virginia Tech, against a rival, going to the West Coast against a team that's probably not going to be all that great. They're going to be okay. It's, empty stands. It's going to be one of those games where I think it's one of those games where they maybe a little bit of a trap game. Not that they lose, but that they play sluggish, where they
Right.
start off sluggish and they have a hard time getting going just because the environment's not going to be great either. So yeah, I don't think I'd move it up further in the list. I think they handle Cal, but I don't think it's going to be a performance where they dominate.
Yeah, I agree, but I think their win probability is over 50% in that game. I wouldn't
Yeah,
say it's under. I would say it's
I agree.
probably closer to 60% for
Yeah,
me if I had to handicap it. All
yeah,
right, the last three, Louisville, Florida, and Florida State. I'm gonna say this about Louisville. They lost a lot of their playmakers on offense. In fact, two running backs that got drafted in the NFL. They got to replace their top receiver, their quarterback. But they still have a really good defense. Ashton Gelati was a handful last year for Miami. Jalen Rivers talked to me about that at ACC Media Day, how the dude is legit. He was all ACC first team. They got some guys through the transfer portal. But it's one of those games that to me, um, Miami should have won last year. They were at home. They ended up losing that game by 7. They were out coached essentially
yeah.
by that staff and gave up 38 points. That wasn't a very good game for Lance Guidry. In fact, I would venture to say it's probably his
It's the
worst
worst
game
one. I would agree.
as DC. But you got to go on the road to play this. I fear Louisville more than I fear Florida in the opener. Agree or disagree with that sentiment?
I agree. And here's why. Like you were saying, I think last year the game plan Jeff Brom came up with against Lance Guidry, he completely outcoached him. He had Lance Guidry and the defense on their heels the entire game, and it was the one game where the defense was giving up points, and it wasn't a result of turnovers by the offense, right? Because Tyler Van Dyke actually played well in that game. They moved the football up and down the field against Louisville's defense. They scored points. They should have scored enough points to win, but the defense just didn't do their end in that one game. So to me, I think Jeff Brom is going to have a good enough game plan to challenge Lance Guidry, keep him on his heels. It's going to be on the road. So all those things factor into me being to me the second toughest game of the season, as opposed to Florida. I think Florida is the third toughest. Florida State, obviously rival, would be number one to me.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm going to say about the Gators game, and I said this on the Big O show yesterday when I was with them for a segment. The reason I'm confident Miami is going to beat Florida in the opener is because of what Mario's done on the offensive and defensive lines. When I went and I saw the Gators in person, and granted this is against Georgia, but I saw the Florida Georgia game in person in Jacksonville. Um, the Gators just don't have enough up front to contend with teams that are built the right way, right? And I think that was their issue against most of their SEC opponents. Their defense gave up a lot of points. They kind of got slugged up front on their defensive line. They didn't really go out and address that. They added some good wide receivers. Florida's going to have good wide receivers. They picked up another kid from Arizona State who will be a playmaker for them. I think Graham Mertz is a pretty good quarterback. I'm not crapping on Graham Mertz. I think he's solid. Completed over
Yeah,
70% of his passes. Their young receiver from a year ago, the freshman who had a big year for them. I think he's going to be good. Like they're going to score points. But I think ultimately where Miami beats Florida and where they get them, is up front. And I think between that and Cam Ward, that's why I got Miami winning that game. So I'm going to move Florida. It's so weird how I'm doing this, but I'm going to move Florida to the third toughest game. And then even Louisville, Florida State, Carlos. Everybody calls me a Florida State fan here. I'm almost ready to say Louisville is going to be a tougher game than Florida State.
because you're using reverse psychology again, Manny. Stop trying to boost the Seminoles through your witchcraft and shittery. I mean, this is ridiculous already. All right, stop trying to sprinkle magic dust on your boys on DJ Uiagalelei. That's not gonna happen. He's not gonna turn into the second coming of Charlie Ward. Chill out, bro.
I think Louisville will be a tougher game than Florida State because it's on the road. I think they're both um, not easy games for Miami. I wouldn't call them the favorite in either one, but I think the fact that you have to go on the road to Louisville and play that game off of a bye week. Let's not forget, these guys are not very good off of a bye week for whatever reason.
Listen, those were the Manny Diaz games. Although Mario hasn't approved that upon.
This is how I have it ranked. All right, we've gone over every single game, and we'll break down Florida more next week on a show. In fact, I'm trying to get Kevin Brockway on, who covers the Gators
Oh,
for
so
the
your
Gainesville
ass is
Sun.
trying to replace me already.
No, no, no. You
This is
can
this
be on
nice
with us.
nice advance notice that I'm getting replaced next week. Thank you for at least giving me advance notice. Usually I get dropped without knowing. I see a podcast notification on my phone, and it's wide right has recorded a new episode. I'm like, what's going on here?
Look, this is
I'm
how
just
I
kidding,
got.
guys. By the way, it's a joke. Relax.
This is how I got the order. I got Louisville toughest game, Florida State 2, Florida 3, Cal 4, Virginia Tech 5, Georgia Tech 6, USF 7, Syracuse 8, Duke 9, Wake Forest 10, Ball State 11, FAMU 12. Do you disagree with any of those?
I'd flip Cal and Virginia Tech.
Okay. You think Virginia Tech home opener be tougher? Home
Yes,
ACC opener. Okay,
yes.
fair enough. But you don't disagree with Florida State Louisville then, huh?
You know what? It's because you want me to agree with you to
I,
help
I'm
your team out.
I'm
No,
just asking. I'm just
I'm
asking.
gonna go. I'm gonna go Florida State 1, Louisville 2. Just because it's a rivalry game, Florida State Miami. I think if I had to, shit. But see, if I'm doing it by percentages, because it's at home against Florida State, I think they're more likely to lose on the road to Louisville than they are Florida State. Damn it, I'm agreeing with you. Okay, Louisville 1, Florida State 2.
I'm glad. I'm hoping our listeners are having this same sort of emotional debate as they're watching and listening to this, Carlos. All
They
right,
they
let's.
aren't. They are just right now. Their trigger fingers are itchy. Their Twitter thumbs are getting on the keyboard, and they are dissecting every single word we've said. Although they haven't really listened to it or paid attention to it, because they generally make comments that hate on us, that don't make sense because they haven't listened to the show. They just pick up a word or two and then jump on that and they start Twitter fingering it. So I think they're Twitter fingering like pianists right now, going off on us.
All right. I hope that covered the season well. I hope we gave you the over under that you wanted to know. We're gonna get to your mailbag questions shortly, but I got one more segment for you, and
Oh
that
no,
is and that is where are the former Canes and what are they doing? Could probably come up with a snappier, snazzier headline for this one, but
yeah, I think Ryan Clement served me some coffee at Starbucks the other day.
well,
Is that what
this
we're talking
is
about?
we're talking about the guys who just left the program because
Oh,
most
okay.
people don't keep track of where did this guy go. But there were 26 guys that entered the transfer portal from Miami in the offseason. You ready to go over them?
All 26?
We can do it
Sure.
snappy. We can do it
Sure. Let's
snappy.
do it. Let's do it.
All
Rapid
right.
fire. Here we go.
Tyler Van Dyke named starting quarterback on Wednesday at Wisconsin. I wouldn't say he's got a huge lead in that race. In fact, if he screws up, Tyler Van Dyke could very well be on the bench. In fact, his offensive coordinator said it's more 1A, 1B than it is one number two. Your thoughts on Tyler Van Dyke?
Not a vote of confidence from the offensive coordinator. I think the minute he sees his own defense, he's going to 1B.
Chikari Brown started the bowl game against Rutgers for Miami. Stuck it out through the spring. Is the backup at UCF now. I think UCF's going to be a pretty good team this year,
I think so too.
Carlos. But he is basically the quarterback in waiting from my intel. Don Chaney Jr. I got a nice positive report on Don Chaney Jr. They said that he's been a positive influence in the locker room at Louisville. He goes and gets guys who are late to meetings. He goes and finds them, brings them in. He's got a chance to be the lead running back there at Louisville this season. I think it's gonna be more of a 1-2 punch for the Cardinals. But I'm glad to hear Don Chaney Jr., South Florida guy who I've known for a long time, is doing well there. And I wouldn't say he's gonna break out and be 1,000-yard rusher this year. I don't know that he's gonna have a huge season, but he could lead the team in rushing and be a reason why Miami is, having
And
a
if we're
tough
going
game.
by my theory, the Willie Burton effect,
Yes.
he's going to rush for 150 yards against the Hurricanes. And for those of you that don't know what the Willie Burton effect is, Willie Burton, this again, I'm aging myself, used to play for the Miami Heat, was drafted by the Heat, top 10 pick, played for a couple seasons for the Heat, decent player, gets traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, I believe, came into the Miami arena and dropped like 50 on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Henry Parrish Jr., Miami's leading rusher the last 2 years, back at Ole Miss, one of four running backs expected to see touches. I think Parrish is probably going to get the bulk of the catches out of the backfield. Quinshon Judkins obviously was the man there. Henry Parrish goes back. He will be a guy that is part of the rotation. Trevante Citizen, the big time recruit that Miami signed that just never was able to get healthy. I saw a little scrap of video of him on the internet at McNeese State, Carlos. So hopefully Trevante finally gets an opportunity to get some meaningful
Hopefully,
action.
the McNees stay together at McNeese State.
Colby Young, who left for Georgia, first team wide receiver with Dominic Lovett and Dylan Bell. He's expected to see a lot of catches in the red zone. Georgia is going to be a high profile team, so prepare yourselves, Hurricanes fans, when you turn on and listen to the SEC broadcasters talk about Colby Young, who left Miami. I'm sure he'll get a lot of pub this season.
He would be the second big Miami receiver to be a jump ball expert at Georgia after God, what was his name? Forgot his name.
You made me forget his name now too.
All
But
right.
yes,
The
he
fans will fill us in the comments. You guys know what we're talking about.
Frank Ladson. He's still playing football, Carlos. Frank Ladson, who
How many
came,
years of eligibility does this guy have?
he is at UMass now. He is a
Wow.
2019 guy, which means what is he? Year six or year seven there for Frank Ladson. It's been a
Jeez.
while. Frank Ladson at UMass. Remember his big time contribution last year, I think, was handling an onside kick, right? Wasn't it? Fielding an onside kick in one of those games. Um,
I think it
anyway,
was also turning 50 during the season. He's now
Brashard
playing with his son like Bronny James is with LeBron.
Brashard Smith, who had some explosive returns and a couple touchdowns here and there that were memorable in his time at Miami. Reunited, of course, with Rhett Lashley at SMU, but he's a running back now. He is playing running back at SMU. They're going to use him catching the ball out of the backfield. I think he'll be a guy that'll see
Man,
some work with Jalen Knighton, another
him and
former
Jalen
Hurricane.
Knight, and that's an explosive backfield, let me tell you.
Yeah, it should be fun to watch. Jaleel Skinner, the tight end, who was, ballyhooed, right? Everybody made a big deal about Miami getting him late in the recruiting process.
Also known as Jaleel Too Skinny.
He is weighing 245 pounds, according to my sources,
That's thick.
Carlos.
He's also 7'5", so that's not a lot.
And he runs like a deer. The issue holding back Jaleel Skinner from my sources, and again, I made a ton of phone calls last couple of weeks, is that his hands just not there. Doesn't catch the
Really?
ball naturally, is what I was told. So,
Wow.
um,
And he can't block.
yeah. Well, Logan Sagapolu, the offensive lineman that Mario brought with him from Oregon. Remember the power lifter,
Weight
the
room All
guy.
American.
weight room All-American, 700-pound squatter. He is now up to 368 pounds, Carlos, and he's playing defensive tackle at the University of Washington. He weighed
Wow.
338 at Miami, now 368, and playing D tackle.
His new name is now Logan Saca Pollo. Saca Pollo Frigidaire. Stop eating the burgers and all the things that are making you fat. Logan Saca Pollo.
Jonathan Dennis, the offensive lineman, who also came from Oregon. I do not have any information on
Dennis the
Montreal.
Menace.
Jonathan Dennis. Collins Achiampong, the big four-star defensive lineman that was in the 23 class. Nothing of note. He is at UCLA, I will say that. Jamil
Good for him.
Burrows, the kid from Georgia that Miami got, the D tackle. Also, don't know where he is. Don't have a school for him. Thomas Gore, who Miami, I think, got from Georgia State. He's with the enemy now. He is at Georgia Tech. So if you're scoring at home, you've got Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin. By the way, Louisville, I was told, really wanted Tyler Van Dyke. So we could have had him and Don Chaney there. But if you're scoring at home, Don Chaney at Louisville, you have Jaleel Skinner at Louisville, and now you have Thomas Gore at Georgia Tech. So SMU also has Brashard Smith and Jared Harrison Hunt, who's next on the list. So you have a few ACC guys that are former Hurricanes. Um, I mentioned Jared Harrison Hunt. He will be in the rotation. This is an interesting one. Chance Williams. Remember Chance Williams?
Chance Williams, yes. Wasn't he a Marshall?
He is at Charlotte now. He
Oh,
is at Charlotte. Chance Williams is at Charlotte. I don't have a report on how he's doing, but he is there. That's where he ended up, the former top 100 recruit. Nigel Lee Kelly, from what I was told by my sources at UCF, is going to probably start
good for
opposite
him.
Malachi Lawrence as one of UCF's edge rushers. UCF again will be a good team, so he'll be high profile. We'll hear from Nigel Lee Kelly, Jafari Harvey, another guy at SMU. He's going to play the bandit position for the Mustangs, which is kind of a hybrid, stand
Linebacker at
up.
the end.
Exactly, edge rusher. Cyrus Moss, remember Cyrus couldn't put on any weight. Another edge rusher that Miami was very excited about.
Should have been
Top,
hanging out with Logan Saca Pollo.
he is at Portland State, Carlos.
Wow.
Listed at 6'5", 215 pounds. Just can't put on the weight. I don't
And
know
that is
what's going on.
Portland, Maine, correct?
No, that's Portland State. I don't know. I think that's in Oregon, Carlos. I think that's Portland State.
Portland, no,
That I think
so
that's isn't
Portland,
that where
Maine.
isn't that where Gadsden or Andy Gadsden former Hurricane went to? I think so anyway. Um, Jaden
Former Dolphin.
former Dolphin, yes. Jaden Wayne, edge rusher, another top 100 guy from the state of Washington, back home at the University of Washington. Should be part of the rotation. Don't know that he's necessarily going to start, but he should be there. Corey Flagg, who was here for a long time, is now a backup linebacker at Missouri. So basically the same exact role that he had here, where he was the third or fourth linebacker. That's what he's doing at Missouri.
Now he
Uh,
gets to eat the bench in the SEC.
Yes. Marcellus Pulliam, the young linebacker that Miami got in the 23 class out of Georgia. He's at Michigan State. Nothing new to report there. Just another young guy on the roster. Caleb Spencer, who came in as a safety, Virginia area kid that Mario signed in the 23 class. He is at Virginia Tech. Doing well, could be part of the rotation for the Hokies. So again, Virginia Tech, SMU, Louisville, Georgia Tech. They all got former Canes on their rosters, and we will see Caleb Spencer most likely in some role here. Savion Riley, the safety that Miami brought in from Vanderbilt in the fall, now at Colorado, playing for Deion Sanders, wearing number 9. I'm not saying that means he's going to play, but when you wear a single digit number, I guess there's an expectation, right?
I guess.
Demetrius Freeney, cornerback at Arizona, not doing anything from what I understand. And Devontae Brown, Damari Brown's big brother, who came here from UCF, is at Florida State. So another ACC opponent. Um, just a guy on the roster providing depth like he was here. Your thoughts, Carlos? We just went over it all. Which of those cuts are painful for you?
I don't know about painful, but I think, I would have loved to have Don Chaney Jr. still here, Nigel Lee Kelly. The guys are actually making an impact elsewhere. I think Colby Young, I think would have been great to still have him here. I think he was a little underutilized. But other than that, I think, everybody made decisions that are best for them and their family. They got to do what they got to do. They got to get playing time. They're trying to earn the ability to get drafted and get in the NFL. So good for them. I think the only one to me that has the probability of having that Willie Burton effect is Don Chaney Jr. I will say, SMU, dark horse in the ACC.
Yeah, I agree. I just finished writing their preview, and I can tell you that I think they are probably the fifth or sixth best team in the league. I wouldn't say that they're a favorite. I think offensive and defensive line, they've still got to get better there. The three power five teams that they played last year all beat them and all ran for over 200 yards against them. So that's an issue, but I don't think it's going to take them very long with Rhett Lashley as coach to become a contender in the league.
I agree, and I think I'd rank them fourth probably in the ACC.
Yep. All right, here we go. Let's go to the mailbag questions. Carlos, um, this is from Matt MH Canes 18. Is Shannon Dawson competent enough to get an OC job at Iowa? Apparently, he's not a fan of Shannon Dawson. We'll go ahead and skip that. I don't know if
No,
we got to
because his
start the
last
hate.
name no, because his last name isn't Ferentz.
This is from Benny Boondocks. He says, "How distraught were you when Feinbaum, this is Paul Feinbaum, and ESPN said that FSU had used up all their tiers in the offseason and not finished in the top 25?" Carlos, what's your reaction? Do you think the Seminoles deserve to be criticized for crying over what happened to them in the playoffs?
Listen, I think the Seminoles deserve to get whatever they get anytime. I know that hurts you. I know this brings tears to your eye. But to me, anytime the Seminoles can cry and be made to feel like the lesser team that they are, makes me happy.
All right, this is also from Benny Boondocks. After Miami's first scrimmage, what's the position group you're most worried about or impressed by? I would say nothing's changed for me in terms
Yeah,
of worried about it. It's still the secondary. Until the bullets really fly, you don't know what you got there. Uh,
exactly.
and I think impressed by, I think the offense in general is going to be good. Like it's just, I think as a whole, receiver, they got a lot of depth there. I would say that's going to be the position I'm most impressed or happy with. Um,
I don't get impressed until the bullets start flying for real.
This is from Rashawn954 on Twitter. One Canes moment that made you go wild with happiness and one that made you lose it in anger. Carlos,
Holy shit!
I can think of one. I was on a podcast earlier today with the guys
Wow,
from the Sporting News who did a make-believe 12-team playoff with the greatest teams of the 2000s, and Miami won the national championship, beat the 2019
damn right they did.
LSU Tigers in the final. But they did, the guy who had me on the show, one of the two guys, is an Ohio guy, and naturally said, I'm not going to bring up 2002, which obviously he did. But I would imagine that's got to be the moment that made you lose it in anger.
See, no, I'm those are easy, right? For me,
Yeah.
the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State, that's an easy one to pick. Alabama in '92, the '93 Sugar Bowl, that's easy to pick. I'm gonna go a little off the wall, not off the wall necessarily, but I think the one that I was at that really was heart wrenching, one of the worst ones aside from obviously the ones losing the national championship, was against Penn State in the Orange Bowl when they had number one Penn State on the ropes
Yep.
and they gave up a late touchdown to lose to LeVar Arrington and that Penn State team when they had that game won because Greg Schiano decided to play press coverage in like third and 15.
Mike
Uh,
Rumph.
Mike Rumph, obviously we love Mike Rumph, had a great career in Miami, but got beat on that one. That one to me is one that really sticks out in terms of painful moments.
Hmm.
In terms of ones that were maybe jump for joy, clearly national championships, all that stuff, but the one that really stands out the most, the one that made me feel the happiest after getting, your nuts kicked in for so long was beating Florida State in the Orange Bowl in
2000.
2000. That to me was just an incredible day and such a great way to get the monkey off the back with an excellent game.
I agree. Those are the two games that stick out for me in terms of just you go to a game and you feel something. I think the 2000, I was there in person um, with my high school sweetheart at the time in
Well, look at that.
2000.
I was
Uh,
I was there with my best friend. We were watching everybody pass out from dehydration since they ran
yes,
out of water at halftime.
yeah, it was a hot day. It was a fun day. Probably one of the most memorable that I got to enjoy just as a football fan back in the day. Before I was working full time for the Herald and writing stories
Before you
and
became a Florida State.
right before I became a Florida State fan, as you like to point out. And I would say lose it in anger. To me, it's the Fiesta Bowl '86. Just the incessant interceptions by Vinny Testaverde. I think
Yeah.
that I don't know how that game doesn't kill you.
No, it does. It does. Yeah. But I mean, those are easy. And when you think about national championship, all that kind of stuff, I mean, another one would be 88 against Notre Dame, the Cleveland Gary fumble.
That
That
was
to me is
that was rough.
that drives me crazy because they should have played for the national championship again and probably won three in a row. That pisses me off.
This is from Hurricane Q 16V Lover. He says, "Been a while, fellas. And what year do you think the lack of playing time will cause a kid to just say I'm out of here? And if they get salty during the season, how do coaches keep the culture of team first intact? Adelante, go Canes." Um, I think the clock for most coaches, and I had this conversation with a lot of coaches in Charlotte, is 2 years. I think if a kid can accept a redshirt season, um, but I think the second season, if they're not in the fold, they're going to hit the transfer portal. I think
Yeah.
that's just kind of, and then in
Well, you're
terms of,
seeing it with freshmen too. We just saw a bunch of guys that were in the 23 class take off.
but I also think what you're seeing is coaches being more honest with guys.
Yeah.
The evaluation system's not great. Like, you know, and that's one thing Mario talked to me about. He wishes that they could get involved in recruiting guys earlier and earlier. He's, ninth, 10th grade, like in terms of really having the freedom to bring guys on campus and get to know them. He thinks that the longer time that you get to know a kid, the better. Because then you can see whether or not they really fit your culture and really fit your program. And um, that's one thing he would like to see to avoid those situations. But I think in terms of keeping culture, I think the moment a guy acts up and crosses the line and does something really stupid, unless he's a great player, they're probably going to get kicked out the door.
And I think it's when you're talking about culture, ultimately the ones that should be keeping the culture alive or enforcing it aren't necessarily the coaches. It should be the players themselves. So the older guys, the guys
Right.
on the roster that are, leaders on the team should be the ones enforcing the culture and setting the tone. So when somebody does act out or somebody's acting like an idiot or somebody's being selfish, they stick out like a sore thumb and they are clearly not within the group and are sort of either brought back into the fold or shunned and told, hey, listen, get your shit and get out because we don't play that here.
Vic Vassal says, "Will Cam throw 30 plus touchdowns?" I think we both agreed, right, that he will throw at least 30 touchdowns.
Yeah, I said 30.
Scary Rhombus, one of your favorites. We've been hearing about Mario working on his game day coaching this year. Any Oregon fan can tell you he wasn't great there either. Why should we believe anything will change?
Because NCAA football 25 came out this year, baby, and he's been working the game because it's in the game, and he's
That's
doing it.
right. That's right. And you can take a knee in the game too.
Oh, jeez.
Um, this is from Jeff, RCJ Matt. No questions, just thank you for the great pod. Thank you, Jeff. Um,
The check is in the mail, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes. Victor Manuel says, "How confident are you that Miami beats Florida?" 80%?
80%, but I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think. I think that game scares me a little bit because it's on the road against a supposed rival, a team that ducks us every year. But if there's any turnovers by the Hurricanes and there's a big run by the Gators off that, watch out.
Miami by 2 touchdowns.
Look at this guy. Who is this guy that has shown up to this podcast today? Oh my God. This is your evil twin that's shown up today.
Von Kane says, "Let's just get this damn thing going. I'm so ready." All right. Nick Green, Big Juice 52. Hot take. If Miami wins game one, we will win 10 plus games. And if we lose, expect another 7-5 season. Do you think they are that streaky in the locker room, Carlos? Is Nick Green, Big Juice onto something?
I think 9-3 if they 8-4, 9-3 if they lose that first game.
Yeah, I don't think they go 7-5. At the worst, they'll be 8-4. This is Thomas Winston Wolf, a good friend of yours there. Mario keeps injury news quiet. So is it safe to assume if a player's name isn't mentioned by Kane's media, it's because they are hurt? For example, you guys didn't mention Riley Williams last week. Just an oversight? And I also haven't heard Robert Stafford brought up anywhere. Tom,
Mainly because we don't talk about tight ends because according to Shannon Dawson, they don't exist in this offense.
I would tell you this. If I'm not bringing up a guy, it has nothing to do with injuries. I'm not that smart. I don't sit here and say, "Hey, I gotta hold somebody's name out if they're injured." How long was I talking to you about Mark Fletcher this summer, Carlos, and the
Yeah,
foot injury and telling you he's probably not gonna be ready for the opener and they're bringing him along slowly. Like I've been telling you guys this for months, even before Mario talked about it. Um, all right. This is Jason Real Hip Hop. Where do you believe Mario's improved as a coach to lead this team with all of its expectations? I don't know, Jason. That's a good question. I think he's humbled. I think he was humbled by what happened to him last season. I think having uh, that colossal of a loss where you don't take a knee and blow it is something he won't get burned by again. I don't expect him to. I don't think he'll do anything that stupid again. But does that mean improvement? I don't know. I just think he learned from it.
I agree, and I think more than anything, he sees a window of opportunity here. So maybe there's no, visible sign of improvement, but I think there's a probably a more honed in focus and hunger, knowing that he has this one season window that can make or break the future of the program, and then he
Right.
can try and springboard this thing forward into the stratosphere that he wants it to be with a really good season this year. So I think he's going to be more locked in and sees the opportunity for more success than he has the first two seasons. And Jason, hit real hip hop. If you're real hip hop, tell me your top five hip hop songs of all time in the comments. There you go.
All right. Sam Knowlton. TVD was just named the starter for the Wisconsin Badgers. Will the change of scenery help, or will he throw 45 interceptions to Iowa in zone coverage?
Listen, I think the change of scenery will only help in the way that throwing interceptions in the cold maybe makes him feel a little bit better as opposed to doing it in the heat and feeling all angry and sweaty. I don't know.
I hope TVD does well. I'm rooting for him.
I do too, man. Poor guy. Who knows?
Mike C. 1018 says, will Mark Fletcher be ready for game one at Florida? He'll be in uniform and he'll be there to play. Will he play a lot?
Probably not.
So probably not. Mike Jones, Jonesy 713. Will you guys host a wide right tailgate for FSU game if both teams are undefeated? Oh, that'd be something, Carlos. We got the sponsorship. Who's paying for this?
Yeah, who's paying for this? Who's taking me in and out of the stadium because I'm not bringing my car and dealing with that traffic? Are we sitting in the press box because I don't want to deal with the fights in the stands? All that kind of stuff. There's got to be certain conditions, man, laid out. I've got a rider that somebody needs to check out and sign before we make these sorts of promises.
Andrew Patrick Cuddy Bag says, when are you guys going to start planning the Las Vegas trip? Which unit do you think is more overrated, defensive line or offensive line? Or is the hype warranted for both? Go Canes. Las Vegas, the Utah game, Carlos, which is in what, 2027, 2028? I forget when it is
Hmm.
now. We do got to do a Vegas trip. I think you and I will be 50 by then, Carlos. That we should do something
Yeah, shit. No, no, we won't. What the hell? You're aging us now too? This is definitely not the right Manny.
then.
2027 is like 3 years away, dude. Come on.
I'll be 49 then, brother.
Yeah, not
Um,
50 yet. Not 50 yet, bro.
All right. Has there been any positive or negative surprises in camp? Andrew, I wish I could tell you.
We don't know.
I think I don't think you get surprised anymore. I think you know who is what by the end of the spring. Guys don't just come in the door in the summer and all of a sudden, like Justin Scott, is he really a surprise? The guy's a five-star recruit. Like he was supposed to be good. Like if he gets in the rotation, that's not really a surprise. We told you about OJ Frederic. Lance Guidry mentioned him to me at the media day. I don't know that anything is necessarily changed. If I hear something, I would say it, but I don't think anything is. There's really not a lot you ever glean from camp. Like
No,
they
and
just
especially
overhype the
now that
same guys over and over
you
again.
can't see anything in camp anyway because Mario puts up like this sauna, this bed sheet, and all you see is like shadow puppets. That's all what
Yes.
you see at practice.
Armando Izaguirre, your favorite. AY2 Armando. How much does Mario learn from mistakes, and how should fans feel about that going forward? I feel like he learned from the hires from 1 year ago and did better in year two and three. Should we have hope post no knee and other weird in-game decisions? Again, you don't know till we get there, brother. Like I told you, I think the Georgia Tech game humbled them a little bit. I don't think you will see them trying to get 100 yards for Don Chaney Jr. again anytime soon. All right, J Boy 1724. First question is, how devastated were you being an FSU fan uh, when ESPN said FSU won't be ranked by the year's end and is overrated? Second question, what former Miami team and Miami coach does this team most resemble to you? I was not
Hmm.
devastated whatsoever that Paul Feinbaum decided to go nuclear on Florida State. I think that's good. I think it's good. I like a little edginess, and that's what Paul Feinbaum gets paid a lot more money than I do to do. So good. It got you fired up for sure. Um, Second question, Miami team, which one does this remind you of? Carlos, I don't know.
I'm teetering between two.
Hmm.
This could either be the 2000 Hurricanes that lost to Washington to start the
Whoa.
season.
Whoa. Okay.
Well, I mean, it fits with what you were saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
11-1, top four seed, all that kind of stuff. That's a
Mm-hmm.
ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could be the 99 Hurricanes with Kenny Kelly that ended up 9-3 that lost that game against Penn State. And ended up going to Ken Dorsey in the bowl game to play. And then when they played Georgia Tech, I think in the Gator Bowl, and they played what was the that kid's name from Georgia Tech, the quarterback that was really good. I forget his name. Anyway, they're they're on that border to me, right? If they play up to their talent, they could be that 2000 team. If they play down and lose a couple games they shouldn't, they'll be that 99 team.
This feels to me like the Derek King team that started COVID 8-0 or whatever the hell it was. And had a quarterback that just uplifted them. And I know the season ended like crap and they got killed by North Carolina. I don't, but that's what it reminds me of. It feels like a quarterback transfer came in. Like you can't really compare it to Kenny Kelly and Ken Dorsey, and those teams were different, bro. Like I don't want to get people confused here. Like Miami can go 10-2 and earn a top four seed, but they're not back. Like
No, no, no. I'm not saying they're back. What I'm saying is in terms of the result of the season,
yeah.
the way it looks, I think they're a Butch Davis because Butch Davis and Mario have a lot of similarities in terms of the way they
Yeah,
play.
I can agree with that. I just think it's a different animal. Kenny Kelly was recruited here. Cam Ward. That's why to me this feels more like when De'Aaron King first got here, and
I
then
think they're
all
more talented than that De'Aaron team, too.
they
You're
could
right.
very well be. They could very well be. Yeah, it's like it's more of a mix maybe of that 2099 team with a De'Aaron King. Like
Yeah,
I
exactly.
maybe that's it. I don't know. Um, and Miami coach, all right, he said, what former Miami team and Miami coach's team? Yeah, it's definitely Butch Davis. Um, this is from Spurgeon's Cigar. If you had to choose, what player position group success will determine how far the team will go? Granted, it's a team sport and there's a lot of moving parts. I'm going to say defensive line. I think if they are an elite defensive line that is producing a boatload of sacks and stuffing the run and dominating, this is a team that goes exactly where I said it would go, winning the ACC championship, making the college football playoff, potentially winning a playoff game, but I don't think it's a championship team.
I think I'm gonna go with the opposite. I'm gonna go with the offensive line. If that offensive line is dominant and protects Cam Ward and gives him the type of time he needs and opens up holes for Damian Martinez and just dominates up front, I think this offense is going to be next level good. And it's going to allow, even mistakes by the offensive coordinator to sort of be erased or glossed over because they're going to be so good up front that Cam Ward is going to have guys breaking open on secondary moves because he has so much time back there.
It all comes back to the offensive and defensive lines. I don't think
Yep.
there's a wrong answer.
And by the way, Spurgeon Cigars, AJ Fernandez, New World favorite cigar. If you want to send those this way, I'll be happy.
Last question for this is from Veconomics. Why were highly ranked players that didn't pan out early for the last decade attributed to bad coaching, but now it's put on the kids? What changed? I don't necessarily follow your train of thought there, Veconomics. I think some of it is bad evaluation from coaches. I just finished
Hmm.
telling you guys how Mario wishes they could start recruiting guys earlier and earlier and earlier so they get to really know guys. Um, I, I just think it's a combination of things. It's identifying the wrong fits. And then I would say it's coaching changes. Like, how long was Art Kehoe at Miami? How long was Don Solinger at Miami? How long was Randy Shannon at Miami? It's hard to set a culture when you're always hitting the reset button. It's hard to set an
Yep.
expectation. And when different coaches come in and recruit guys, and you change the coach 2 years later, the players that are brought in during that previous coach's regime usually have to go somewhere else because they don't like coaches don't just come in and accept everybody on the roster. They're going to run them
Yep.
off.
Yep.
So it's different. It's a different answer to that question because college football's changed.
Absolutely. And like you said, hitting the reset button and rebooting everything doesn't always work. Hopefully it does for the DC universe now, because God, they're driving me crazy. But let's see how it goes here for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I agree. Carlos, thank you for joining me today again to do the Wide Right Pod. People can check out your podcast, the MIA All Day Pod. Can they still order t-shirts?
If they want to hit me up, I'll see what I can do.
All right. Make sure you find Carlos on Twitter and find his podcast as well. I appreciate it. Are you okay? Did I go did my evil twin take over too much today? Did I overdo it?
I don't know. I'm going to take a long walk outside and ponder what's going on in the universe because if you're flipping this way, then I've got to question I got to question reality and what's going on and whether we've now ascended into a different Earth and this is an alternate universe that I've been thrown into and see what sort of Mandela effects I pick up on as signs of this parallel shifting universe because of what's happened here today.
Buy Kane stock, Carlos. They're gonna win the ACC this year.
Jesus Christ. All right. Yeah, definitely. Something's going on here.
We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.